This is Roll Call for this edition of African Drums. The African drums are sounding.
Hello, welcome, good evening, welcome to another program of African Drums, the organ of Cuffy 250. I am David Hinds, sitting in for LC Harry, who is off on vacation. Tonight we are going to be speaking with one of the members of Cuffy 250. It belongs to the Cuffy 250 Overseas chapter. And his name is Dennis Wiggins. He's no stranger to the public. He is a regular contributor to the letter section of the newspapers. One of his most recent letters was a letter replying to Freddie Kissoon on the issue of the Walter Rodney Commission. Dennis is one of the founder members of Cuffy 250. Before he left here, he was a university student, as a member of ACDA. In fact, when ACDA held its first conference of African Guyanese in 1997, you were one of the panelists. Dennis is, like I said, a founder member of Cuffy 250. And tonight we are going to be talking about a range of issues as they affect African Guyanese. And I want to say that, you know, this is the organ, the television organ of Cuffy 250, and we tend to, first of all, take things from the perspective of African Guyanese, which is the constituency that Cuffy 250 works in. But of course, when we cannot speak about African Guyanese outside of speaking about other ethnic groups in Guyana in general. Dennis, welcome to the program, and it's nice to have you. I mentioned at the top that you are a founder member of Cuffy 250. How did you get involved with this idea of Cuffy 250, as I would like to describe it as?
First of all, thank you, Dr. Hinds, for inviting me here this evening. I'm visiting from the USA, as Dr. Hinds mentioned earlier, and it's a pleasure to be here. I got involved with Cuffy 250 because Olive Sampson, one of the very active persons in the USA with the various organizations, asked me when the idea of commemorating the 250th anniversary of Cuffy 250 came about. I think the idea was first brought to the fore by Anthony Browder. Mentioned it, and the Ghana Day committee spoke with Olive, and she invited a few of us in the USA. She invited me, of course. I always believe that the diaspora has an important role to play in development issues in Guyana, especially with the African Guyanese situation, dealing with African Guyanese condition. So when the opportunity arose, I was forced to be with the idea of commemorating this 250th anniversary of the Cuffy 250. But as you know, the scope broadened as the committee came together, yourself, Mr. Abrams, and a few others, and we decided to confront various issues of interest to the African Guyanese community in Guyana. And as I said, it is important that the diaspora play an important role in dealing with questions concerning the development of Guyana, but particularly African Guyanese.
Let me pin you down further on that, the role of the diaspora in what's happening here in Guyana. And to really ask you, what is, our chapter in the States, how has it been able to help the work of Cuffy 250 here in Guyana?
Right. Well, one of the things that we do is we think about ideas that relating to issues affecting African Guyanese, but not with the input of African Guyanese in Guyana. We basically fund various programs. We had some fundraising programs in the United States, and with consultation with the groups here, Ghana Day Committee, and so we raise funds in the United States as well as contribute ideas of development, things like the education program, entrepreneurship that we think is important to building the African Guyanese community. So we're idea contributors. I want to say.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And then
as well as financial backing.
Financial help and so forth. And of course we do, like whenever like you're in the country,
right,
and members from the committee are here in Ghana, do participate in activities here. And last year the chapter there held a big independence conference.
The 50-50 conference.
Right.
Yes.
What we call the 50-50 conference, to begin the conversation on where we've been in terms of independence in Guyana. Let me, Dennis, ask you this question, because it's one that we constantly hear, especially from those who would not like to see us do the kind of work that we're doing in Cuffy 250, which is partly raising consciousness among African Guyanese, partly encouraging a spirit of self-respect and dignity among African Guyanese, partly instill a spirit of community and a spirit of entrepreneurship among African Guyanese. That is, as I said on this program last week, to really lift the African Guyanese community to be on an even keel with other ethnic groups in Guyana as a means of working together. But there are those who are saying, well, why do you all have to just think about black people? Why we can't just think about all Guyanese? Speak to that.
Yeah.
Not a criticism, but perhaps a malicious observation.
Yeah, it is important that African Guyanese deal with African Guyanese interests, because African Guyanese know what affects African Guyanese. We have in this country a government that is not particularly concerned with the interests of African Guyanese. Okay? And once we recognize that, African Guyanese groups in the diaspora and in Guyana have to be able to deal with the issues affecting African Guyanese, since there's that absence of concern for the welfare of African Guyanese is important. So I'm not really concerned about people who would say, well, why y'all only talk about African Guyanese. Indian Guyanese deal with Indian Guyanese interests and concern. Nobody really say to them, well, why you only deal with Indian Guyanese interests and concern. So it is important that we do that. It is important also that we reconnect African Guyanese with their history. It is important that we reconnect African Guyanese with ideas of how to develop themselves. I'm not saying that we, as Guyanese, we won't have opportunities and avenues to cooperate with other ethnic groups, but the concern for African Guyanese must particularly be dealt with by African Guyanese. Okay? Race matters in Guyana.
Marcus Garvey. Who argued that.
Exactly.
Very strenuously.
Yes.
And he was correct then. And he's correct
now.
No.
Right. And it was reiterated by the American scholar, I'm sorry, his name, thing. But anyhow, yeah, it was Marcus Garvey that bring about the idea that race matters. And we should...
Cornel West.
Dr. Cornel West.
Who actually has a book called
Race Matters.
Yes.
Exactly. And it was... He argued the case very well, why Africans in the diaspora, wherever they are, should look after Africans' interests, because other ethnic groups deal with their ethnicity, and nobody really says to them, well, why is it that you're dealing with your group? The Jews deal with the Jewish interests. Whereas religious groups, the other white groups deal with their interests, African Guyanese must deal with African Guyanese.
In case you're just joining us, this is the African Drums. I'm David Hinds, sitting in for LC Harry. And I have as my guest tonight on the African Drums, the organ of Cuffy 250, a young Guyanese scholar. I can call you young because you're younger than me. A young Guyanese scholar and activist, Dennis Wiggins, who contributes regularly to the letter section, not as regular as you used to in past days, but you were part of the debate on shared governance and so forth. And so you're therefore not a stranger to public issues here in Guyana. Now, I want to press you further on the whole notion of race first and race matters. Because we live in a multi-ethnic society, and often in these societies, there is a timidness of confronting the issue of race. And Guyana is that. I call it timidity. Some people call it, some people say it's really, it's really not timidity. It's really just a guise people use. Shut up about race, so that I can practice racism. And so, especially African Guyanese, get into the business of not wanting to talk about race. Tell us how that affects us negatively when we, as African Guyanese, who are generally those who are affected negatively, mostly negatively. Now, other ethnic groups are affected by race. All ethnic groups are affected by race. But given the history of the evolution of race, African Guyanese are most negatively affected by race. And so, therefore, the logic follows, should be the one who should talk mostly about race. Tell us how, when we don't confront race, when we don't talk about race, how it makes us vulnerable as a people.
Well, with Africans who were brought from Africa to work as slaves in the so-called New World, were always seen by the oppressor, the white slave masters, as subhuman. And that idea, that notion of the African subhumanness was passed on to other ethnic groups that Africans had to deal with. And so it affects us by the way people see us, and also by the way we see ourselves, because that thinking of the lesser than human, the 3/5 of a person mentality, we inculcate that into ourselves. So the need to emancipate ourselves from that type of thinking becomes more important. I'll tell you a little encounter that I had only today, traveling the minibus going home. You know, I'm here, I like to interact with the community, so I use the minibus. And so there was a young girl sitting next to me, and she was carrying on this conversation with her friend, and she related to the friend how one of our friends had this nice white baby, and she fell in love with the baby, and she said, "Man, I want a baby just like that, just so white. Me want walking around with no black baby." She caught herself and looked around, and she looked at me, and I'm smiling Dennis Wiggins. But that's the level of
a kind of self-hate.
A self-hate.
Yes.
That's the level of self-hate that exists in our community as African Guyanese. So it becomes important, Dr. Hinds, that we teach our young people the importance of African pride, to inculcate in them that where the history of the rich history of Africa, where we came from, but not only where we came from, but where are we going as a people. There's this thing that our dear great friend Dr. Clarence Ellis used to say to us. He said, "They will only respect you if you respect yourself." Okay?
Yeah.
But the people do not respect themselves if they know nothing about themselves.
Yeah. And that phenomenon that you talked about there is a constant phenomenon, the whole question of self-hate, and the whole question of regaining and recapturing that sense of self. Other ethnic groups don't have to deal with that issue in the same way, because what slavery and neo-slavery have done is that they've reinforced in us that lack of liking ourselves, and so we're constantly having to battle with that. And here in Guyana, we have a government which, as part of its whole policy, have sought to reinforce the negative tendencies in the black community, and by reducing our participation and our importance in this country just to partying and dancing. If you look at a lot of the mega shows just over the holidays here, they're directed at us. And so therefore, that whole notion of using government as a means of reinforcing black self-hate is something that we're up against, and that's part of our mission in Coffee 250.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, and the important issue that we have to deal with in Coffee 250 is teaching our people how do we see, not only how do we see ourselves, but how do we see ourselves in relation to others. In a society when other groups are more successful than you, you tend to look up to them and you tend to look down on yourself. When you see poverty is pervasive in your community, you tend to begin to think, well, there's something wrong with you. Okay? You don't look at the other factors that create factors such as marginalization, because marginalization has been a way of deepening the poverty in this society by government withdrawing resources from the African Guyanese community. We've argued over the years about this issue of marginalization, and it is real. It is real in this country, where the government find it necessary, not only because of black support for the traditional PNC group as a punishment for black people, but also as a way of elevating their people. Okay? So Coffee 250, we in Coffee 250 recognize these issues, and that's why for us it is important that we redirect African Guyanese focus on what is important. How can we as a people compete in this environment
and become equal,
and become equal,
so that our participation in the politics, our participation in elections are vitally important, but we have to do more than that as a people. We have to be able to participate in the economy, that black people have to start making money. Let's be frank about it. Part of the problem in poverty is that our people do not have access to money, and there are lots of money that is handled by the government of this country, and the government is responsible for distribution of these resources, and we are saying there's an unevenness in distribution. Those who are class analysts often say, well, both Indians and Africans are victims of this distribution of wealth, because the wealth is in the Indian elite, and that is correct. But even the African middle class themselves are marginalized because they're Africans. So if you look at Freddie Kissinger do that brilliant study, that if you look at contracts and you look at the percentage of contracts that go to African Guyanese contractors, is minuscule compared with contractors. So even the African Guyanese middle class itself is marginalized. So when one talks about the class nature of this government, one has to say it's a kind of East Indian cabal, right, that excludes the African middle class, excludes the Indian working class, excludes the Amerindians, and exclude the African working class. So we have to put that in. Yes, the working class is being excluded because of class, but there's also a race at work. And if you listen to Mr. Chatri, Mr. Nandalal, and it talks about the Chatry, it lets the genie out of the bottle, because it's really saying to us here that here is a merger of Clive Thomas's criminalization of the state with what we are calling the racialization of the state. All right, and when so you have the Chatry syndrome in this country, and so when we talk about prorogation, we have to put it in that context. Let me ask you some quick questions here as they relate to us. Reparations. Why should black people make it our business to make sure this reparation thing is being pushed?
It is our business because our slave labor went to billion countries that were enslaved by the European masters. European countries got rich because of free labor. A large percentage of capital formation come from labor. If you can get labor cheap, then a large part of the saving that goes towards capital formation result from that. We never got paid for our labor, and because of labor costs, the ability to save costs, European countries were able to benefit from African slavery. It is therefore important that we push for that they pay us, or as we are ancestors now, but it's important that they pay African people what our ancestors work hard, the brutality of slavery they endure for so many years. So reparation is important to us, Dr. Hinds, and we should never drop that issue.
What form should it take in a place like Guyana?
I believe African people should, whatever comes out of the reparation issue, people should deal with that. First of all, reparation should go towards an issue of education, which is extremely important. Right. Because if you look at the state of education in this country, reparation should go to dealing with issues of capital distribution for African-Guyanese businesses. Reparation should deal with issues of poverty alleviation. Microlending program, various programs that benefit African-Guyanese as we think of them. Those are things that reparation should deal with. Social benefit, where people who cannot earn a living because of whatever disability or so, money should go to help those people. What I'm saying is that whatever monies come out, benefits come out of reparation, should go directly to African people.
And they should be policy oriented. And so this whole business of debt relief that is being peddled in certain circles, we want to say in Coffee 250 that we are totally opposed to that. That we want whatever resources should go, as you say, to education, gets better schools, better universities, better conditions for children, put our children back to school, let them become scholars and doctors and mechanics and the best of the lot. Again, it should go towards helping to lift the society, our community economically, especially dealing with the question of poverty. And of course, one thing I would like to add to the list that you mentioned, the healthcare, because part of our afflictions, the hypertension, the diabetes, came out of the kind of diet, the slave diet that came out, and so that's one of the things. So I'm very glad that you've raised that issue. Reparation is not about getting some money to put in people's pocket, but it also should not be given to the government. should not be given to the government of this country. It should be African Guyanese who should determine the policies and the programs. And so we've got to mobilize as African Guyanese groups. We quarrel among ourselves sometimes and fight too much. But on the issue of reparations, we have to stand firm in this country and say that whatever resources are accrued from reparations should be determined by African Guyanese people and their organization for the benefit of African Guyanese. The big word and big thing in this country is proroguing. You walk down the street, you hear them little and they'll say, I'm going to prorogue you. You know? So it certainly has had an impact on people. Prorogation, your views?
Prorogation is a serious issue. And I'll tell you my disappointment before I tell you my views. When you suspend Parliament, you suspend the voices of the people. It therefore means that the people should respond. Okay? My disappointment is that I came to Guyana expecting to see major protests and marches, and I've seen none. And I wonder, why is that? Why there's no major protests, no major marches, when a government take it upon themselves to shut down Parliament? I recognize that prorogation is legitimate by Constitution. The Constitution of Guyana provides for that. It does not mean that it's not an illiberal mechanism. It is an illiberal mechanism. Okay? The people at election, people go to vote. They vote for the executive and they vote for the people's representative who are in Parliament. If the government takes it upon themselves to suspend Parliament, they're suspending the voice of the people. My question is, why are opposition groups not organizing people? Why the level of apathy in this country is so high? And a society, for a society to be truly democratic, such a society must be activist in nature. The foundation of democracy is activism. So you have to have a means of response when a government does something like proroguing Parliament, like suspending the voice of the people. You have to have a means of response. Why are the opposition groups not organizing the people? Why are the people not responding? Those are the questions that I have. And you know, it is when you have a society that is so apathetic, it facilitates the level of authoritarianism that we see, the level of dictatorship that we see. Because a government governs by authoritarianism when people are not concerned about their own interests. And how people become concerned about their interests? The people's representative must organize them, and that is not happening in this country. It's extremely disappointing.
Yes, and when we look at what's happening in Ferguson and what's happening in Staten Island and what's happening all over the United States of America, one has to ask the same question about us here in Guyana. What's wrong with us in Guyana? And part of what's happening there is that the African Guyanese community have been given, the African American community was given leadership. There were voices always out there talking about those issues. Some of us teach, and we teach race, we teach African Guyanese history. So a lot of the students you see in the streets protesting are products of those programs in which we teach them of their history and teach them about racism and how it functions in the society. And so when we look at what's happening there, what we see is the coming together of forces, leadership, people's frustration, the African American Studies programs, which have played a role, and create a new a breed of African Americans who have constantly said that we are not going to take that. Now, go ahead.
Yeah. The African Americans have always been an activist group, from the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
From the civil rights movement throughout, they've always been an activist group. The foundation of democracy is getting people involved in issues that affect them. Okay? In Guyana, the opposition parties have made a conscious effort to withdraw protest movement because of concern about rogue elements and the business class calling for suspension of protests. No democracy functions when people do not get to participate, when things affect them. No democracy. So the opposition cannot concern itself about who's affected, which class of people are affected. The opposition must concern itself with the welfare of the people. The people's voice must always be first and foremost. The opposition groups are in parliament to represent the people, and the only weapon that they have against dictatorship is the voice of the people. As you know, in the WPA days, people's power, no dictatorship.
Right. And resistance is very much part of black culture. There could be no black culture, there could be no black community, there could be no black society today without resistance, because you do not endure 300 years of slavery without resistance. Slavery itself breeds resistance, and resistance itself breeds freedom, and freedom itself creates a culture of resistance. It is why in our music there is that resistant element. In our sport, when we play cricket, when we box, that resistant element is there. It is why Buxton people stop training. It is that resistant element which is part of who we are as African people, black people. And it is something that we have helped to give Guyana and the Caribbean its character. And that's the character of resistance. And so what I hear you saying is that we live in a society in which there is a systematic effort to de-emphasize resistance, and in the case of the government to criminalize resistance. And so that the emphasis of resistance, that criminalization of resistance, is a direct shot at the African Guyanese character, because part of our character is that constant resistance, which is our gift, not only to Guyana, but our gift to the world, the spirit of resistance. And the spirit of resistance is a human spirit. It is something that human beings, it is just that because of the extremeness of slavery, it means that that comes out much more in us as a people. And to criminalize it or to de-emphasize it is really doing a disservice to us as a people.
Definitely.
And I think you're quite right. Shared governance. We've talked a lot in this country about it. And I want, first of all, but I want mostly for you to talk about shared governance here from an African Guyanese perspective. Why is shared governance important for African Guyanese first? And then we'll talk about how it's important for Guyana in general.
Shared governance is important to African Guyanese because we need to participate in governance. But not only the fact that we need to participate in government, from a political perspective, it is the best governance principle to ensure that equal access to resources is provided to African Guyanese. It is the best governance principle to ensure that African Guyanese welfare, that African Guyanese have an equal share in the resources that is distributed
All
in
right.
in government.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to talk to the ordinary listener, viewer in Pleasance.
Right.
I want you to talk to that black boy or girl in the Amstel. I want you to talk to my friends them in Bucks and my country people them. I want you to talk to them people in Golden Grove and Anns Grove and BV and Pleasance and Virgin Nugent and so on who watching me here tonight.
Right.
Why a government of national unity? Why shared governance? And that thing you talk about there, the sharing of resources, why it's important to them. Let's not worry the politicians. We know they're listening and watching, but let's assume they know the story. Let me talk to them poor people, ordinary people.
Because of the historical race issue in this country, certain people get majority of the resources because people traditionally vote race. By African Guyanese being able to share power, African Guyanese can have a government that is able to distribute resources to African Guyanese communities. By having an African Guyanese representative on a particular board, for example, African Guyanese interests on that board, whatever board it is, can be addressed.
Yes.
An African guy and a minister from a party that represents African Guyanese can look at an issue that the government, for example, an Indian government, and say, well, Buxton need certain resources, a bridge, money for some business person, entrepreneurship, education, for example, a new school that in a when a take-all system would be overlooked necessarily.
Would be overlooked because if the PPP alone sharing out the resources, deciding who get in contract,
exactly,
right, deciding where schools gonna build, and they naturally would tend to favor their own constituency. It's not that they won't put some in another constituency, but the first instinct would be these people vote for me. I have to look after their constituency. And what you were saying is with Mr. Granger in the government, right, sitting there, he will be able to say, but wait a minute.
Right.
African Guyanese contractors got to get some. Because we know that when the contractor get the contract, most likely he's going to what? Employ African Guyanese people and so on and so forth.
Because it is normal for government to govern in the interest of their own people, the constituents.
Yes, right.
It is so by having representative of people that represent you particularly being able to be part of the decision making, be part of the policy formation, those people can have a voice that says to the government, well, and Victoria needs a school and Victoria will get a school. That direct voice.
And of course, if Enterprise needs a school, Enterprise gets a school. But it's not where 75% of the schools will be in one ethnic constituency and then 25 in the next. We're talking about parity, equality, fair distribution of resources. And yes, our representative in Parliament, but Parliament is not where the action is. The action is in
at the executive level.
Right. Yes. That's where the money gets spent. We see that even when the Parliament tell the finance minister don't spend, what you do? He still spend.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And
where is he spending it?
Exactly. Yes. On his friends and some of his supporters and so on and so forth. In case you're just joining us, you are, of course, yes, this is African Drums. African Drums. I'm David Hinds, sitting in for LC Harry. And of course, on this program, we talk about issues, national issues, regional issues, international issues that affect African Guyanese in particular, black people in general. Not because we think Guyana is only for black people, but because we think that somewhere, some people, some groups have to speak up for African Guyanese. And we feel that enough of us have not been speaking up for African Guyanese. And so this organization, Cuffy 250, has said, look, we want to make it our primary business to speak up for African Guyanese. Now, it doesn't mean that when Indian people get advantage taken on them, or Amerindian people get advantage, or Portuguese people, that we're not going to speak up for them. Don't get me wrong. But what we are saying is that there are particular atrocities that are committed against African Guyanese in particular, and that we have to have a particular response to that. So that's we're talking. The second reason we are doing this program and talking to black people is that, as my brother here, Dennis Wiggins, who is on the program tonight, said earlier, that look, there are certain particular problems that affect the African Guyanese community, that even when issues affect all communities, they affect them differently. And so therefore poverty manifests itself in the African Guyanese community in somewhat different ways from the way it manifests itself in other communities. And so we want to tackle that question of poverty. We can't give you jobs, but what we can do is try to bring material, technical resources and advise you and encourage you how to go ahead and create your own jobs. And we can put pressure on those who have the resources to bring jobs, to talk back to them and to talk on your behalf, right? We can't bring a school in Stanley Town or Good Intent or Denhamstel or Boxer. But what we can do is what we've been doing in Stanley Town. We can create a lesson center. Yes. Where your children can go in the afternoon and get their lessons supervised. Yes, right there in Stanley Town on the west bank of Demerara, we're doing that. Or we can do the emancipation camp, where you send your children during the August holidays or on weekends, as we did in Bagotville, as we did in Stanley Town again, where the children come and they learn about black history. That they learn about black businesses, and they learn about black invention, and they learn about black people and how important we are to the world civilization. That's the kind of work we can do. We can help you, encourage you to help yourself. That's what the business of Cuffy 250 is about. And we are expanding into other communities. We have recently gone to Baikoni. We are going to expand into Plaisance, going to Virginusian. We've gone to the West Bobbies, and we intend to expand. And some communities have been calling us to come to their communities. Some of them have been saying they want to be part of Cuffy 250. You want to be part of Cuffy 250? We're accepting individual members. You want us to come into your community? Of course, get in touch with us, and we will come to your community and help to lift black people up. That's what this business is about. To lift black people up. We don't want black people to be down on their knees. We want black people to stand up erect and to take your rightful place in this country. Everybody's spending money and getting rich. We want black people to get rich too. No, I'm not talking about black capitalism. I'm talking about black empowerment. I'm talking about black people getting jobs so that they can help themselves. I'm talking about all them young women who are unemployed being put and given jobs. And we're going to fight and we're going to defend your right for those kinds of things. But more importantly, we want you to stop being pawns of those who think that you are worthless. Those who think that all you can do is to lift up your dress or lift up your shirt and wind up. We want to say to them, you're more than that. Right? We want to say to you that you're more than that, and you should not present yourself as just that. You should present yourself as a people who have ambition, who who have dignity like all other people. Now we all like to party and do our thing and so on, and we're not saying to you don't party. We're saying but your life must not only be about party. And when other people bring in party for you at every twist and turn, at some point you have to say, I ain't want so much party. I ain't want so much. When you come, don't bring party. Bring some jobs. Bring some education. All right? Bring some programs that can make me realize my potential. So you at some point you have to say no. Because you know something? I know you all don't know is a big secret. A lot of these artists that bringing in is the very PPP that you all saying that oppressing you all know it's them subsidizing a lot of them parties. You know a lot of them promoters are being subsidized by the government to bring, so that money you spending going right in the PPP pocket so that you can fight the election and win it or whatever they do to it to oppress you. So when you go to them big dance every 2 morning, what you're doing is contributing to your own oppression. I'm talking to you all tonight, black people, especially the black youth. You all got to become much more conscious. You all have to understand that you cannot participate in your own oppression. You all have to understand that don't make nobody give you a $20,000 so that you can go and kill your brother. You can go and take advantage on your sister and all those kinds of things. You are worth more than $20,000. Don't make yourself so low that somebody come to you and tell you put on a PPPC jersey and I'm going to pay you $20 to go and wind up and Granger this and Granger that. Stop the nonsense. We are worth more than that. Right? We must not reduce ourselves to the point where we say, well, think bad with you and I have to live. Well, the way you deal with that is that you help to create the conditions in your community and in your country where you can live not just for today, but for all times. Now, that's my little thing. Dennis, let's talk about this issue of elections, because it's in the air.
Yes.
And we've got to confront it. And we know that elections don't solve problems, but we know they're important. And there's an ambivalence, I think, in the black community about elections, because so many times we have gone to them, we've asked them to vote, they've voted, and they've not seen how their vote has translated into something, some better situation for them. But they're going to be asked to vote in a few months again. Yes. So I want you to talk about the vote, the problematic of the vote, the importance of the vote for African Guyanese here in this country.
Yes. What I've recognized in this country is because of years of not seeing any effectiveness in governance, the African Guyanese have in numbers increasingly withdraw their support. And so you have this level of apathy, this thing where people say, well, oh, what do it do for me? I ain't voting. That's not my thing, boy. They can try there. But as we've seen for the past 22 years, is that if you don't go to the polls, if you don't vote, what you do in effect is elect a government that is not concerned about you, that will marginalize you, that will keep you out of the benefit of governance. When you vote, your voice is heard. When you vote, you're properly represented, whether in parliament or the government. You give the government the party that you vote for the best chance of forming the government when you vote. The vote directly affects you as a people, African Guyanese as a people. So it's important that you vote. It is traditionally known that African Guyanese vote for a particular party. It's no secret. Okay? Regardless of what party you vote for, you must vote. It is important. It is your civic duty that you vote. It is where you determine your welfare directly. Who represents you? Who goes to parliament? Who does not go to parliament? Which government is in power? So the vote to African Guyanese is important, and we have to recognize that as a people. We must participate in this election, especially this election, where we see that this government is fighting for its life. And this government is indeed fighting for its life. And I will say that I don't believe that this government can win the next election. That's why it's important that we as a people fully participate in this election coming up. It's important that we go out there, that we bring our family members out, or a grandmother, or aunts who usually don't vote. Tell them we have to go to the polls, because this election is the most important election for us. For 22 years, we've had a government that has effectively oppressed us as a people. And they're hanging by a string. And they know that. Okay? So it's important that we get out there, Dr. Hinds, and vote.
Yes, and we want to, of course, make sure that we tell our viewing audience how important this is. We understand the frustrations. We have been critical of our own stewardship within the African Guyanese community. That our leaders, and I include myself, I include you, I include all of us, whether we are in political parties or not, we as leaders have not always been forthcoming in defense of the rights of our people and in promotion of their rights in this country and the right to be part and parcel of this country. But we cannot, by virtue of that, give it up to those who are oppressing us. That's what Brother Dennis is saying here tonight, and I want to associate myself with that. That yes, we know that elections are not always the answer to problems, but what elections can do is to open the door,
yes, so
that we can begin to deal with these issues that affect us. Dennis, let me pin you down on two particular things because our time is running out. And you belong to another organization in America, yes, called the Committee for Improvement of Boxers. I know all your Bostonians watching. Right, so I give you all a little plug. Dennis, tell us Simbox and what it's been, yes, doing for that village and so forth. Yes.
Well, we've supported particularly education issues because we realize that education is a big concern in the African Guyanese community. Boston is an African village, as you know. So right now we have a program where we give scholarships to students that would have written and get a good grade at the SEC examination. The top students, we give them scholarship programs. We have another scholarship right now, and I should say thank you for giving me this opportunity, where we have a $3,000 scholarship to any Bostonian who is in the health field, nursing, or any allied science.
Not 3,000 Guyana dollars.
3,000 US dollars.
Ah, talk money.
3,000 US dollars. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in nursing or any of the allied science, you can contact Dr. David Hinds. We have $3,000 of scholarship that we're ready to give to you. We also support cultural activities in the village. We would give out money to if there's any cultural activities, steel pan or any cultural programs that you have. The Simbox is there to help.
Committee for the Improvement of Boston. If you're in the sciences, if you're in a nursing program, in a pharmacy program, or anything, you can apply for that scholarship of $3,000 US dollars. You all Bostonians, you are here. When I come there, I want them application come in so that one of y'all or two of y'all can benefit, because we can split the scholarship in two if we have two applicants that meet the criteria. The Committee for the Improvement of Buxton. So talking to y'all Buxtonians, I know the rest of y'all say, well, it's only for Buxton. Alright. But it's for Buxton. And so we want our people to get into the sciences. So they say black man can only do liar and so on and things. And social work and important things. But you know, diversification in education. UC Guyana has been an inspiration to you. I know. And I know you want to at this time, UC is gonna be 90 years old. You've seen it all, right? Next year. Pay tribute to Guyana as we close.
UC has not only been an important Buxtonian, UC has been an important Guyanese fighter for the interests of all Guyanese. Because if you speak to UC, you will tell UC is first and foremost a Pan-Africanist. But UC is concerned about the welfare of not only Guyanese, Indian Guyanese, and all Guyanese. He has dedicated his life over the years to representing Guyanese to ensure that government function on behalf of the people. And he continued to do that. You would hear from UC through the letter sections. Fantastic memory for 90-year-old. You talk to UC from time to time. He has so much history in him. As you know, UC came up through as being part of the two major parties in Guyana, the PP and the PNC. Has written their anthem as a poet.
He was also part of the WPA and has written the WPA and so forth.
And from the member of ACDA also.
Of ACDA. Alright. I noticed they tell us our time is up, and I just want to know, so you all have learned that there is such a person called a UC Guyana, EUSIKWAYANA. It means Black Man of Guyana in Swahili. I want you all young people to go and Google it. I know you all could Google good and find out about this great African Guyanese who have made an impact. All you name Abina and Kwame and Kofi is because of Guyana and Askria. So I want you all to do that for Guyana, do that for Burnham, do that for Walter Rodney, do that for Chancellor, for Ivan Van Sortimer, do that for all the great African Guyanese and black people who've contributed to make you where you are. Learn about your people. So don't just go and Google them fancy juicy things. Google about your whole people and things. Dennis, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I hope that you've been able to bring some perspective, bring some information, and bring some learning and education to bear on this program, The African Drums. Until the next time, this is David Hinds, thanking you for joining us for yet another edition of the African Drums. You know, when the drums begin to roll, it's Kwekwe time, it's Ganga time, it's Nancy time, but more than that, it's liberation time. And it's time for what? Self-reliance, self-love, self-respect, and more so to say you are black, you are proud, and you are dignified. Stand up for yourself and respect yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will respect you. Enjoy what you can enjoy for the rest of 2014, because by the time we come at you again, it will be 2015. And I tell you, it's going to be the year of the turn. The year of the turn. I remember as a little boy in 1979, we said that would be the year of the turn. 35 years later, I'm saying the same thing here, the year of the turn. Good night.